You are listening to That Big CEO Energy, where we talk all things business, life, marriage, and push you to a new edge of discovering what that big CEO energy means for you. Listen, I understand that we have barriers that we carry from when we were once employees, and those have impacted us as we continue to build our businesses. I'm here to walk alongside you and give you encouragement through interviews with friends and other women in business who have broken down those barriers and paved their own way. Tune in with me as we uncover some of the unconscious things that we do that keep us from building that big CEO energy we've always dreamed about. Let's dive in. We are back on the inner soul journey, and I'm so happy that you have come back to listen. We always start, and you know this by now, we always start with sort of where we are. And one of the things that now listening back to this that I brought up was coming back to myself relieving this noise out of my head. And I want to spend a little time on that with you all. And there are a few different episodes that I talk about that. But, you know, sometimes when we get into therapy, we don't know how much trauma that we're showing up with. And so when we show up with all of this trauma and we start working through all of that and we get into the deep parts of the amygdala and really pull back the onion layer and find relief in those, what happens is we create space in our brain. That space in our brain is quiet, it's peace. And for those of us who are craving that, when we finally arrive to that, sometimes it's a little bit alarming because we don't know what to do with that. We have no idea. And so the next phase of therapy or your journey, whatever that looks like, is finding relief in the peace and not like we have to fill it with all of this stuff and things. And so I'll be honest, this has been a really, really challenging part of the next phase of who I am. And it's kind of difficult for me to work backwards. And so I walk through a little bit of that, you know, just uncovering that to Laura when we begin our session. So I'll let you listen here for that. I have worked through a ton of trauma in the past 2 years with, you know, clinical therapy and sort of those things. And I actually was just talking to my therapist this week about this. It's opened my brain to just be quiet and just still. And I'm having a really hard time accepting that's number one, okay for me, but that I also don't have to fill it with noise. And part of this surrendering process for me looks like not forcing, but encouraging myself to have quiet moments and spend time to just be, because my brain really is needing that. It really is sort of craving this down time and be away from the noise and just be a little more intentional about the way that I'm showing up for myself. So part of that looks like, you know, a lot of people know that my mom has some mild cognitive decline, fancy word for saying that she has started on her dementia journey. So that has been mentally taxing for me because I don't have a lot of support from my brother. He's just kind of like, oh, whatever you're doing is fine. Like, whatever's clever, you know?
Yes, there is a big difference between piling more on your plate and just trying to add than to have sort of like a give and a take working simultaneously so that you don't enter into that stage of burnout or overwhelm or, you know, so that you're not disconnecting yourself from the quiet, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel my need for being quiet needs to come not just by putting time on my calendar to be quiet, right? So
that's currently what I have is I have like little 10-minute sessions throughout my day, and I'll physically get up from my desk, go sit in my living room where just everything is quiet and just be. But I want to be able to do this deep work outside of 10-minute increments. Right? Like, I don't know how productive I'm going to be when utilizing 10-minute increments, but yes, and like, this is what is happening now because that's what I have time and space for. But if I can find ways to have my mom help on the business end so that I'm able to spend, 2 hours or an hour or whatever that looks like kind of on the other side, I think that'll really help me begin to understand, like, what does this path for someone look like? And I have a lot of it like journaled, and I have a lot of it like written down because this is sort of my path that I'm going on, but also I'll be a little more intentional with social media and, really be thoughtful about the things that I'm putting out. And I think the only way that I'm able to really do that is to spend time like really meditating on like, is this serving me, first of all, if I put this out in the world? But how is it going to serve someone else? Because if it's just me cranking out things into the world, that really doesn't bring anyone joy. Like, there's a time and space for that. Like, if you have a product or like a photography business or something, like sometimes it's a little bit easier to like pick the pretty images and be like, because people go to that page expecting to see those things. And so if you're already creating them for your clients, like, you can easily pick those out and put those together in a beautiful composition and post it, right? That kind of is a little bit easier than, and you know this all too well, than spending time on the other side of like, how can I thoughtfully love on someone and also love on myself at the same time and be kind to myself when I'm posting out in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think if it's true, then, right, all of the things that we've talked about and being intentional on social media and really spending thoughtful, careful time on what it actually looks like, if that's true, then time and space needs to be open to be able to do that.
Well, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there with a visual business versus a non-visual business. And
yes,
impact, coaching work, transformation, deep healing, connection, these things are less visual.
In part of showing you how hard this is for me, I share a story about going to a therapy session and an exercise that my therapist did for me. And it's kind of funny to listen back and hear this now, but it's also kind of sad. It is kind of sad that my brain will not right now relax as much as I need and I want it to. So listen to my little story. In my therapy session, she had just an image because we've been talking a lot about my ADHD tendencies that I have. And she said, you just like you're wired all the time. Like my energy level throughout the day, and like I live in the Midwest, so I'm a fast talker. I watch YouTube videos at 1.5 speed. Like my brain is just like a Rolodex, right?
Yeah.
Just, it's fast. And it is that we've established that it is because of my need to continually fill what trauma has released. That I've worked through, right, a lot of the fight or flight sort of instincts that I have. But like there's this little guardian that's in my brain that's like, but let's fill it with all of these other things because that is fun and that is exciting and you still get to be super productive and
like your body still gets to be fed with this fight or flight response. And it's like, wait a minute. Like the overload of stress that we're putting on our brain is actually harmful. It is actually to the point where it is like unhealthy. And I had the instruction of just look at this image, and it was a heart and it had flowers on it, lots of different colors. And she's like, just focus on that. And so like she, had me deep breathe, and like, I'm watching this, and I had to shut down my eyes because I was still, as I'm focusing on this image, going, I wonder who drew that. Wow, that flower's really interesting. Look at the colors on that. Wow, look at the shade of that one. Like my brain was still like, like having all of these things percolate, and I just needed to shut it down. And I realized in my last session that a ticking clock really is soothing to me. Like it is the one thing that, and it is part of my childhood. My grandma had like a old grandfather clock. And so you could hear it tick all throughout the house. But it was just, my grandparents were like a safe space for me. So like the association, right, of that being together. And so she goes, this sounds like you need to go and buy a ticking clock. And I said, I guess so, so I did. I ordered a ticking clock because I'm like this, finding little pockets of peace, I think, to always be encouraging my brain to slow down. And like you were saying, so that we can rev up in a different way and exercise our brain in a different way. I really, truly feel like that is kind of going to be the catalyst to be able to fully jump into this work.
So in all of that, we then pivot to talk about kind of the general direction and how I'm feeling overall about what I know to be true about myself and what direction I am heading. And so I start to uncover what it is that my innermost desire is. So I will let you listen to that.
Are you feeling clear about the general direction you'd like to move forward in?
I think it's becoming more clear. And I think one of the big areas that is clear is helping women understand that we don't have to run it all. We don't have to. And the reason why we don't have to is because there are other people that are fully equipped, fully capable to help. And the resentment that we show up in sometimes throughout our life, the resentment that we have in our businesses, the resentment that we have with the people in our life is sometimes because we didn't set clear expectations and we didn't communicate clearly. And so how as a leader of your business, if you lead a team, how can you communicate clearly so that one, feelings aren't getting hurt, but everyone is sort of on the same page in terms of boundaries, delegating, all of the big buzzwords, right, that we're hearing. But it really is true. You can lovingly set boundaries with people and still have the same outcome that you want from the people, from the business, from whatever, but the work has to be in here because that's an us problem. That's not a them problem. That's an us problem.
Why is it important that work takes place?
It's important for our mental health. It's important for the relationships that we build with people professionally and personally. And it's important for growth. Your business will not flourish. Your business will not, if you're saying, I want to make I'm just throwing out numbers, $1 million this year. And you're doing all of this stuff and things because you cannot release what is going on inside of you. You're never going to hit $1 million. Like $1 million businesses don't operate by one person. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
$50,000 a year businesses don't operate with one person. It's a community of people. And so if it's true then that you're saying success is measured by happiness, well, that's a direct correlation into who are you delegating to? How are you opening, right? This time and space, and I think this whole part of me surrendering to, I need help so that I can open up this time and space to spend with myself. Well, that is another piece of someone else's puzzle also.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating that the place that you're wanting to dig in with other people is currently the thing that you're working through and on for yourself.
It's so on brand to what you're saying of your personal growth is your business growth, right? It just is. And it has to be. It has to be. Mm-hmm. And I think, even for the women who are leading teams professionally and maybe don't have a desire to have a business or, their side gig is always going to be their side gig, which is totally fine. That's, sometimes your side gig never turns into a business, and that's because you don't want it to. But even if they're leading teams professionally, when I was in corporate, there was a lot of resentment that would be built up because I felt the need that I just had to do it myself. I just had to do it myself because who else could be capable of doing this? And it didn't help me grow my team at all. And it didn't let me see the value that other people brought into their positions enough for me to say, oh my gosh, like Susie has been doing all of these things behind the scene and she's been asking for more help. And so when it comes time to me giving her a review, I just give her the same review because I haven't really invested in Susie either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then it's pulling apart well, why can't I allow people to be in their zone of genius fully? Why can't I allow myself to delegate to other members of my team so that we're all being maximized in the capacity in which we are available, right? So I think that's really where the bread and butter is getting to those core parts of, if you are leading a team of people or if you are finding yourself being stagnant in your business, there's a must for you to look backwards and inwards and say, what is coming from me that this is the reason why this is happening? And that's scary shit. Mm-hmm. That's really, and it's hard to raise your hand and be like, oh, I might be the problem.
Right.
I might be the problem. But if you don't at least pull back the onion layer a little bit to see if that's actually true, most people don't even want to do that. They don't even want to open the onion to even possibly explore that they could, in fact, be the problem.
Well, because it's scary to do that. And you think like, oh, and everyone says it's hard work. And it's like, whoa. And of course, we know what real personal development feels like and unlocks for us.
And now the juice comes. Friends, we walk through this next section of our coaching call, and it is all about the inner critic. What the inner critic is saying to me, what it is going to say to you. And so part of my journey here has been unlocking what the inner critic is actually saying, what it actually means, and then how we work through sort of sending the inner critic off to the deep end, right? Goodbye, good riddance. We don't need this here. I don't have time for that. So I'll let you listen to that part of our conversation.
Do you have a relationship with your inner critic?
I think my relationship with my inner critic is probably similar to everyone else's. I think my relationship with my inner critic has developed over time.
Okay.
But there's still parts and pieces that show up. But I think part of that is now that I'm able to start noticing what the critic is saying, I'm able to shut it down a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the inner critic is, what do you know? Like, oh, you're doing it that way? That's interesting. That's really interesting. Everyone else is doing it this way. You should probably do it that way because that makes more sense. And that gets you quicker results. So don't you want to go and do that thing? It's a little bit faster. I mean, it makes more sense.
It sounds like your inner critic is often trying to divert you from your inner wisdom.
Oh, 100%. Isn't that what the inner critic always does?
Well, some of everyone's inner critic has different things because our insecurities are different.
Sure.
So and I think for a while I had that same belief that like everyone's inner critic sounds the same. Everyone's self-doubt sounds the same. Everyone's comparison and imposter syndrome sounds the same. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that it's like a much more complex type of character who will be really quiet in certain areas that don't affect you hugely and really loud in the areas that do. So I was going to ask you what your inner critic thinks of this next maybe phase of your business or career and what it feels about Hallie stepping into the role of a coach or a mentor or a supportive person in someone else's personal development. What does your inner critic think about that?
So it's interesting. If you would have asked me this when we first started, I would have been like, it is telling me to run away as fast as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's happening over time is it's getting quieter and it doesn't really have much to say. Because the wisdom is stepping in front and saying, you don't, like, doors are closed, VIP only. You don't have any room here.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a really wonderful place to be. I think where the critic shows up in these moments is, again, just, well, how are you actually going to do that? Like, how is this going to play out? Like, you want to be in this, and look at me saying the word coach like fluently out of my mouth today. I mean, we've arrived. But
that dirty word, coach.
The dirty word is no longer there. It's here. It's arrived. We're doing it. We're doing life. It's now in the, well, if it's true that you're this coach, well, what are you saying?
Mm-hmm.
Where's your people? Because you don't have anyone. I mean, you're not really coaching anyone. And it's like, well, no, that's not true, because the first person that you have to coach is yourself so that you can coach everyone else.
Yeah.
So the wisdom is getting bigger, and it's in these little, I think, day-to-day moments where when I start to work on something, that's when the critic decides to walk into the room. That's when the critic shows up and is like, excuse me, I have questions. Just need to know
who, what, where, when, why.
Yeah. I just have a few, it's like when you're at a board meeting and nobody has spoken for weeks, and then all of a sudden the person who you least expect to say something is raising their hands with questions. You're like, why are you asking those? You've been here for 6 weeks. Catch up, right? Catch up. So the critic is like this lazy being who just like, I work here, but only sometimes.
Not driving the bus.
Not driving the bus. I think wisdom has fully gotten into the bus seats and like the bus. But the critic is like the teacher assistant that sits behind the bus driver and watches everyone in the bus. Like you have to pay attention to everybody in the bus and make sure that everybody's doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And if they're not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, you're the one that's pointing it out, and you're the one that's saying, well, I mean, do you think you should be doing that?
This is where it is when we have talked about this vessel where you deplete and then you refill and you deplete and you refill and you only live in that source. You are not growing your wisdom unless you are adding more and expanding your vessel. So I think that, as you've said it really well, that the first person that you're coaching right now is yourself. If you had one client that you were coaching right now and a vision for coaching more people, Callie would logically be on a mission to capitalize on sharing about that client's experience. What kind of work are you doing? What does that look like? Testimonials from that client. Well, hello, you have the name tag of your first client on right now. So part of the next phase is to treat yourself as a client. And you don't do your coaching work in 10-minute bursts. So if you're coaching yourself, the input needs to match the output, and the output needs to be capitalized in terms of what it can bring to you and your business. What did you just hear from that?
This whole idea of treating myself as the client and capitalizing on the space and time in which I am with my client, i.e. myself, can be massaged and should be massaged into areas of testimonials in such a way that is curated into content where people come, and when they are in the same time and space, they know that they are being held. They know that I too have done the work. And then if that serves them, if they're ready to step into that deep work, then I'm here waiting. But nobody will know. It's kind of like if the restaurant doesn't have a sign out at the road, you don't know that it's there, you know? And we've had this too, where we'll be driving down the road and we'll be like, oh gosh, I almost missed it because I didn't see the sign. Same thing, right? If nobody sees the sign and nobody knows that it exists, which is the same that I always talk about delegating. If nobody knows that you need help, nobody can help you. 0 people. So it's the same that's true for me. If I don't let people in on what I'm working on in my own personal development journey, how do they then show up? They won't.
It sounds like there's lessons in self-prioritization as well.
Ooh, yes.
I have needs. I have thoughts. I'm changing. I'm growing. We use the term, we say it so much, put yourself out there. It's like, it doesn't mean anything anymore when we say it.
Right. Yeah.
But assertion of self needs. I need help. I need support. I need quiet. There is a prioritization that's coming that I think for somebody to be able to hire you in the area that you're thinking of focusing on, if that's one of their struggles, is self-prioritization and asserting needs or asking for help, consider how challenging that's going to be to hire someone in that area.
Yeah.
So they need to see that being led by example.
It's interesting because reflecting on our previous session where we went through I want to feel. And it was, I want to feel welcomed in my body. I want to feel that my work matters. And so if that's true, then it is the direct reflection of this self-prioritization that needs to take place. I need to find the space for quiet so that I can feel the things that I want to feel. Am I going to look dumb? And that's the little critic, right? That again is showing up. Like, are you going to look dumb? Things, if you're going to look dumb, like, let's just not do that. Let's just not do that.
What is that?
And then I don't do that. It's self-doubt. It is me not being fully comfortable with living in the uncomfortable, like there's this show up piece, but then there's this like show out piece. Like it used to be really prevalent in the horse world, and I would, when I rode competitively, it was you got to show up to show out, and we would show up and have all of these glitz and glamour, and like no matter what, you would do anything to make sure that you got first place or whatever that is. And when I take sort of that example and put it into sort of like what I'm trying to curate, it's not that I'm trying to be the best. It's not that I'm trying to be the first. A lot of those things for accolades that I chased when I was younger and even in my corporate career, they need to be dead so that I can show up in such a way where it really is just myself and not feeling like if someone sees this, they're going to affirm that I am correct. Like,
i.e., we're not doing it for their external validation.
Yes. But it's just, it's this little, and I know that it's from components that are in other areas of my life when I was growing up, that is the reason why it's showing up professionally. And so I actually put a feather in my therapist's cap of like, this is something that I really want to work on because like I was born into a household of like the accolades matter. That matters. You go to school, you get a 9-to-5 job, you get a degree, you go and you get all of the stuff and things, and you make your resume out to be the best that it could possibly be so that an employer can't say no. Because no was not accepted in our house. Anything less than a B was not accepted at all. And so I have this tendency to translate that into all of the work that I do.
I want to just jump in here because one of the things that is coming up is I'm starting to talk about what has transpired when I have been growing up and kind of what unknowingly, right? Unknowingly what has been brought up and sometimes what can happen as we parent our children. So just to give you a little context on sort of where this conversation is heading, part of the importance that I wanted to uncover here was, and I'll just reiterate it for you, is when you are sitting at the end of your life and you are surrounded around the people that have made it that far with you, your accolades don't matter. When you show up to a funeral, you never see all of the blue ribbons. You never see the plaques and the 50-year anniversary of whatever job you were in. You don't have your job title scripted under your name in your obituary. And so if it's true then that our connection to this world is each other, then that's what needs to be our focus, not getting recognition for all of the wonderful things that we've done. Yes, there is a time and place for being first. Yes, there is a time and place for doing the work. And a lot of character gets built out of those things that we do when we are small. But if those are the only things that you are talking about in your life when you are in adulthood, and if you are only talking about the things that you did when you were young as if they are some badge of honor, I'm going to encourage you to look at that differently. And this next part, I hope, is just a revelation of care. And because I cannot leave without a final encouragement, I'm going to leave you with this.
The disaster that we put on ourselves when we make that the expectation for our kids or even for ourselves growing up, like you see that unfold years down the road and how detrimental that can be.
And even, and especially because the carrot moves as we move.
Yes.
It inches forward. Would there have been an age where you could go back today and have that younger version of you get a little glimpse of you today and realize that they would be so proud of what you've got going on in your business today?
I think it's probably during the formative years of, being a teen. That's really where you see a lot of the accolades come to play because you're playing sports or, like my mom ran the equestrian team. Like it was, and I was in the horse world my whole entire life since I was 2. I mean, I from the time I could walk, I've been riding horses. So the competitiveness outside of school, outside of, that is like an added layer to all of the stuff and things that you put in like school age children. And I think if 16-year-old me could say, none of this shit matters. Mm-hmm. None of it. 0. At the end of your life, when you are on your front porch with your husband, it doesn't matter that you got 16 blue ribbons when you were 8 years old in one summer. None of that matters. Yeah. Did you leave feeling amazing at the time? Yes. And I think what matters during that time is spending time with my mom during that whole entire, she never missed a horse show. She never missed any of that. And it was like at 16, that didn't matter. I didn't care about that. People that are in your life now, they matter.
Mm-hmm. Do people need this message?
Everyone.
Do they need it from you?
Likely, yes. Even with tears.
Oh, that is going to be your superpower.
I walk through life with my mom now, and it's like, sometimes that's all she has to talk about is her accolades. And does that want to be my life?
Do people need this from you? Do you bring something different? What is that?
Surrender. Finding peace. Finding joy. Finding what matters to you as a human in who you are, not who your family created you to be, not who social media tells you that you are. Who are you?
And at the risk of looking dumb, how much does that matter?
I don't think in a world where we crave connectivity, you can look dumb if you're showing up as your whole self.
The only people you can look dumb to are the people who reject everything you are about. They reject it. They don't want it. They put up a wall to it. They protect themselves from it because it is triggering, scary, and repulsive to them. And their reaction is so much more about them.
I think what happens is I have a deep love for taking care of ourselves. And I'm now understanding the importance of really that self-prioritization, really understanding how truly important that is so that you can take care of everyone else.
Let's not discount the fact that by you helping other people to learn how to do that for themselves, you are actually caring for people.
Yes.
So if that's a core value that you have, if it is a core value of your messaging, then it is something that you are going to bring into your role as a coach. Because when your inner critic asks you, what do you know? You will always, always be able to answer that question with, I know how to help people care for themselves, and I know how to help people care for each other. So what do you know? It doesn't have to be the stuff in books. You will always be learning. You will always be growing as a coach. I believe as a coach, you have to always be reading something. You have to always be expanding. That is the difference between replenishing your vessel and expanding your vessel. And I see this as like, we're making pools here. We're going from a glass jar to a pool. That's how much we want to build. But when you come back to that message and when your inner critic is saying, but show me the facts and the numbers and the tables and the charts about what you know, you are going to have to build a bridge between that inner wisdom being a way of caring for people as well. Because that is something that you know that doesn't look maybe as tangible or as written down or as, and there's these moments where when you said, even with tears, I can help people even with my own tears. Your heart commitment to this work is a big piece of what you're going to bring to it. So we don't want to diminish that. We want to pour into that. Maybe there's a discovery of something beyond our 10 minutes of quiet, but something that you find, because you're going to have to find your own version of that. No two people's versions of that are the same.
Yeah.
Should we pull a card for you today?
Sure.
How you feeling?
Feel good. It's always a good session when I cry, you know?
Yes.
My therapist knows to just have a box of tissues waiting.
Okay, so I have 2 decks that we could pull from today. The blue deck, the Starseed deck, comes with, I would say, maybe like simpler / easier to follow messages than this white deck, the white light deck. This one uses some words that are more like you could get weirder messages in there, like you are part of the nebula galaxy. Okay. But like it'll have a message or a meaning. Are you drawn to either one?
I'm drawn to the more simple, I think.
Okay. Maybe next time we'll do the white one.
Maybe next time. Baby steps, what we're doing here these days.
Anything particular you'd like to get out of this card pull? A general message or something more specific?
I don't think so.
What are you taking away from today?
Letting my wisdom be louder than my critic. Showing up in tears is better than not showing up at all. I am my first coaching project. And so I deserve the testimonials.
Thanks for tuning into the show today. If you heard something that helped you, I would love it if you would leave a review and share it with your friends. This helps more people just like you become inspired to move the needle of their big CEO energy into a positive direction. If you would like to learn more about how I can help you streamline and position your business for growth or lead your business as a CEO, feel free to jump into the show notes with all of the links to find me. And don't forget to head over to Instagram so we can be pals.